college papers can be really challenging. It takes all of your brain and willpower to sit down and put a draft together. And when you finally complete that first draft and submit it to your professor, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. That is, until you receive your comments back. Full of so many scratch marks and weird phrases, and you might be wondering, what am I supposed to do with this? What am I supposed to do with this? If you're looking at your comments and kind of freaking out, keep watching this video to learn more about marginal and end comments and how you can make the best of them. The comment vague or be more specific can be confusing. What your professor is likely asking for is more clarity. What are you referring to here? Or can you provide additional details to support this claim? In response to these kinds of comments, look at your statement again. You know what you are trying to say, but how can you make your point even more clear to the audience? Keep in mind, however, that you are not just writing for the professor. You're writing to an audience and you are considered the expert. Let's look at an example of a potentially vague statement. Vague. Strong writing skills are an important factor in student success in college. Let's scratch that and try saying it a different way. For instance, a more precise version of the sentence would be, student success in college depends on their writing skills. Even though the difference between the sentences may not seem large, one actually is much more concise and gets to the point and is probably more what your professor is looking for. In academic writing, it's usually best to try to make the most concise and clear statements possible. So your sentence is awk, or awkward. This short and cryptic comment really just means that your sentence may need to be restructured. Try rewording or rephrasing your statement differently. If you are still confused, meet with your professor or visit your local writing center for a second or third opinion. Here's an example of an awk or awkward sentence. Awkward. In terms of both skill and technique, the student, a freshman, is a good writer often. A better way of saying this would be, the freshman student is a consistently proficient writer. A good tip for how to make an awkward sentence better is usually just to actually read your paper out loud a couple times or have a friend read it. And usually by doing so, you'll actually be able to hear where your sentence isn't flowing as well as it could or how the statement sounds potentially awkward. The good news is, solving an awkward sentence is usually not a big deal. It's really just a rewording process and trying to figure out the better way to say what you have already said. You may receive a what or even just question marks in your marginal paper comments. This comment is a tough one to decipher. A what or a question mark may suggest that your professor has gotten confused at some point in your draft. It may be that your statement contradicts with your argument, or perhaps the information in your statement seems irrelevant to your argument. This comment suggests that some information may feel out of place or unrelated. If you receive a what comment, consider if what you're saying in the statement agrees with your argument. If the statement is not relevant to your argument, you may need to just take it out. However, if you still think that your statement does agree with your argument, you may need to just reword your statement to make that more clear. In the case that you want to keep your statement, but you still have the what comment, you need to probably figure out how you can say it in a different way that aligns with your thesis or your underlying argument of your paper. Remember, if you think that it's important to your argument, you should try to find a way to keep it in. You just may need to represent it in a way that helps your audience understand what you're saying and why it's relevant to your topic. In the event that you receive a what or a question mark comment, it might just be best to email your professor and ask to meet with them to talk through this comment because it is so vague in general. In doing so, you may actually have a much better understanding of why they were confused and how to go about fixing it, rather than just trying to read into this simple and vague comment. Now that we've taken a look at some of the most common and confusing marginal comments, now it's time to get into the second kind of comments you may receive from your college professor. In this portion of the video, we're going to be covering end comments. What are end comments? How do I respond to them? The end comments say my paper was looking good. Does that mean I don't have to make revisions? And what if I'm still confused about the end comments? These are 4 important questions surrounding end comments and how to respond to them. We're going to be breaking each one down to help you better understand what to do after you receive them from your professor. So what are end comments? End comments are left at the end of a paper by the professor. The comments are in paragraph form and are a more detailed response to your paper as a whole. Here's a basic example of some end comments that were presented in Summer Smith's The Genre of the End Comment, Conventions and Teacher Responses to Student Writing, an article that was written to define and look at elements of end comments. In his article, Summer Smith talks about how most end comments follow a similar pattern, beginning with positive reinforcement, a couple suggestions, and ending with some encouraging words or additional comments. In Smith's journal article, he pulls some common examples of end comments from national samples, such as this one, which came from a paper about child abuse, which received a C grade overall. The comments in this example of end comments begin positively by telling the student that they did a nice job and that the format is working well for them. However, it also goes on to point out some areas where it might need some additional attention, such as transitional elements or looking at mechanical errors. The professor gives them an end comment about where to focus their attention and how things are working and how they're not working, and lets the student know that if they have any questions, they can come visit him, no problem. Overall, as we can see in this end comment, the professor did a good job of encouraging the student while at the same time letting them know elements of the paper that needed more work. The student can understand that while they are off to a good start, that there are definitely some areas of improvement that could help make the paper even better. Next, we'll be looking at a different example of an end comment on a paper which received an A grade overall. This second example of end comments was taken from Penn State and was on a paper evaluating the life of Booker T. Washington. Although this paper did end up receiving an A grade, I think it's important to point out how the student had some really high compliments from the professor, but still had areas that needed worked on. For instance, in the middle of the end comment, we can see, ideally, you would spend a little more time establishing why you chose particular criteria and not others. Remember in future writing that this is important. This is encouraging because it shows that there is no way to write a perfect first draft. Even a paper such as this one, that ended up getting a grade A in the end, began with some helpful encouragement and also some critique on areas that need potential improvement. Your paper will not be perfect the first time. Do the best job you can, and then gladly take any feedback you get from your professor, from your peers, or from your writing center, and do your best to make changes that help your revisions improve your paper over time so that you have the best possible version when you turn in that final draft. Some final thoughts on responding to end comments. First, end comments prompt revision. End comments and marginal comments are not a way to evaluate your grade or justify the grade you end up getting on your final draft. All of these comments from professors are helping you build your paper and revise your paper, and hopefully create the best version possible when you turn in the final draft. Which brings me to my second point. No paper is perfect the first time. Did you hear that? No paper is perfect for the first time. Now, that is not to say that you can't have a really good first draft, but that is to say that you shouldn't take the criticism to heart or the comments to heart. All of the comments and the critiques are helping you make your paper better, and your professor does not expect a perfect paper the first time. And actually, if you go into your first draft trying to make it perfect, you're only going to be frustrated and resistant to the comments you receive because you feel like you've already written a perfect paper. So my personal tip is go into your first draft with a positive attitude and an open mind for any comments or critiques you may get from your peers or from your professor. All of these people are trying to help you, and you should really appreciate any feedback you can get. Perfection is not the goal. Improvement is the goal. Remember, your professor is like your coach, and the end comments that your coach leaves for you should make you feel both encouraged about your abilities and also ready to make changes for your paper. And perhaps the most important tip I have for you is it's okay to ask for help. Email your professor if you have any additional questions. You can either schedule a meeting with them in person, or if you're taking an online or dual credit course, an email should be enough to get some more clarity on comments left in the margins or at the end of your paper. I know it can be intimidating to talk to your professor or ask for help, but that's what they're there for, and they would gladly help you improve your paper by clarifying some of their comments so that you can do a better job in the revision process. In short, don't be afraid to ask for help. Your professor, your peers, and workers at the Writing Center would be glad to help you work on your paper. Take it from a fellow college student. The revision process can be a bit intimidating, but once you start talking to your professor and your peers and getting used to receiving feedback, you realize how valuable it is, and that it's not a criticism or critique of you personally. It's a bunch of people taking time out of their day to help you make a better paper. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some of our tips helpful, and we wish you good luck in your revision process. You got this.